So today I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into what it really means to put it all together with workflows. Of course, there's a lot of great things that you've learned throughout this course on what it means to, think more deliberately about how we're prompting, getting the most out of these models, and really pushing them to their boundaries. But of course, there's a lot of tricks that you can use to make sure that you're thinking about all of the slots or placeholders that you should be filling when specifically building prompts for the generate text action within workflows. We like to call this framework DT rows. And I'll get to why it's DT rows in just a second, but you'll notice the E is optional here. But it really stands for the components of a good prompt. Data is at the top. That is the actual grounding information that you would need to perform that task. As an example, it could be an input to the workflow. It could be an output of another step, like a scrape step as an example that has gotten us all of the actual information that might be associated with the URL. It could be a document from the info base. There's a lot of ways that we're creating and using data throughout workflows. So data should be pretty self-explanatory here. Task is really a clear definition of what you actually want the model to do. So as an example, if you wanted to create a summary, it would be the specific prompt that you would use to do that. As an example, please write a 1-paragraph summary with supporting bullet points underneath it. The other components here, so rows, actually are designed for the background section of the prompt. The role is leveraging, the idea of the specific role that you want to assign the AI. So in the summary use case we had thought a second ago, you could be an expert summarizer, a 20-year expert at Penguin Random House Publishing that produces book summaries. Again, you've probably learned about role already, so I won't belabor the point, but it is important to consider that as a part of the background of how you want the AI to act, or what specific cast of what specific character it should act as a part of the cast. Objective is the objective that it has. So as an example, a persuasive summary that your objective is to create persuasive summaries that motivate the readers to buy a book, right? Could be an example of that. Structure and examples are two of the more nuanced points here, but they are really important. Structure, as an example, is really how you want the outputs to be displayed. So as an example, it could be what I just said, right? A 1-paragraph summary with supporting bullet points. And it actually exposes an opportunity for us to actually even be more specific about how we want AI to structure the output of something, or even the specific things that should go into that slot. We'll talk about this a little bit more in just a second. And then examples are really examples of the specific task that you want it to perform. So as an example of a summary, an example of an email, an example of a target audience analysis, whatever your task is, right? Providing AI examples, rich examples, is actually one of the greatest ways to improve its performance on a specific task. So now that you know what these components are, let's actually map this back to the UI that you are likely familiar with already. This is where the information goes. Data and task goes on the top within the prompt bucket. This is the actual information plus the specific thing we're asking it to do. And then role, objective, structure, and examples go into the bottom. And this is just an example of a random prompt that has only background related information. And I guess it technically has a little bit more guidance on what it should do in a world where something is not available. And so understanding this, one of the things that's important to do is actually going back and auditing every step of a workflow after it's generated, to basically spot check and ensure that whatever steps you're including are actually designed to be what you intended them to be. This is one of the easiest ways to catch bugs or errors that you might see downstream. And of course, the chat builder is amazing, but it's only as good as the prompt you put in. So sometimes take some liberties in making assumptions about what you're asking it to do. Now, let's double click on structure a little bit. Structure is as I mentioned, one of the most important ways to actually ensure that you're getting consistent outputs. And there's a lot of different ways that you can use structure. Now, first, how do we actually use structure? Super simple, right? We can say, use the following structure for your output. No magic here. You can say, use Structure your outputs as the following, right? There's no like, specific way to say this, but the way that you define your structure is important based on the task that you have at hand. And there are a few examples here. Now, structure can either be explicit or implicit. These are, a few different examples, right? So for example, if you're working on a data extraction task and you just know that there's going to be some bullets and you want to leave it a little open-ended, you could say something like extract each property as a bulleted list. Or if you wanted something a little bit more specific and you wanted them numbered, you could say something like the bottom, property 1, property 2, property 3, property 4, so on and so forth. And same idea goes for summarization as well. Again, the different tasks that you're actually trying to get it to perform might be designed to be something that works better with either implicit or explicit instructions. But again, structure is going to be very specific to what you want it to do and how it's going to be used later. So again, this is another example, a 2-sentence summary followed by a bulleted list of supporting details. Again, this is the implicit. We're letting AI determine what kind of bullets it wants to use and how it wants to ultimately format the output. Another example of an explicit structure for the same thing is something like this. We want the word summary followed by a 2-sentence summary and then a bulleted list of each supporting detail underneath it. One thing unique to note about using explicit structures is it actually gives us a ability to tell it where to put certain things. So in this case, we have a 2-sentence summary right after summary, right? And in a prompt, we might just say, write a summary. And here we could say, we want a 2-sentence summary within this specific block. The beauty of this is it actually allows us to do things we like to think of as micro prompts. So you can nudge AI to do something in a specific way, or write a specific bullet, or write a summary in a specific way. And we can do it within the structure guidance that we're actually providing to the model as well. Now, obviously, these are the two core ways that you're probably thinking about using structure, but think about it from an integration perspective, you probably have very different requirements. It needs to be a valid JSON or CSV output. In an explicit sense, you can literally define the JSON object that you are trying to create and have AI mimic that as well. And you can also use micro prompts as a part of that. And so really the idea behind structure is ensuring that we're telling the model what outputs we want. Whereas in a chat context, you obviously could just tell it to fix it or say, hey, format this as a CSV, right? Or something like that. With workflows, it's really important to get structure right because this is going to drive a lot of consistency downstream and make it so that we can say, guarantee, right? If we run a workflow 1,000 times, another step is expecting a specific kind of output that we're giving it the most consistent outputs and preventing kind of the downstream impacts of inconsistencies, which unfortunately are errors. Diving a little bit deeper into examples, as I shared, examples are totally optional. I think at this point, structure you should think of as non-optional. Every great prompt, every great workflow prompt should have structure in it. Examples, though, are a really great way of improving the fidelity and impact of a workflow to do something specific. So, again, no magic words here, but we like to use something like use the following unrelated examples for context in producing your response, or maybe just exactly the text here. And best practice actually suggests that we put examples within these little caret brackets. And the beauty of examples is that we can give it exactly a definition of how it should perform a task. And if we give it example inputs and example outputs, we can actually teach the AI to how we want it to perform a task with exactly the input that it's going to get for that step. An example of this would be if we're having it take let's just use something simple. If we're having it take a social media post and then having it extract the key themes of the social media post. In inputs, you would actually put your social media posts because again, that's the input that the AI is going to get from you in that step. And the output again is expecting the output of the themes. So say putting the previous step together, if we had a structure that we were expecting of a list of themes, right? And your output here, you could actually give it the example matching themes as a list. And the closer this is to the exact task that we've asked AI to perform for us, the more effective examples are at driving the outcomes that we want. There are some ways that examples can go bad, but I don't want to go too deep into that. That's another challenge that can sometimes be associated with you really training the AI to do a task wrong, is the TLDR. So if, for example, in that example I just gave you, you told it to use a structure, and then in your output example, instead of giving it a list, you gave it, I don't know, like a paragraph of themes or something weird like that, and it wasn't a list at all, you would actually be basically using the examples would be contradictory from the structure. So it's important to make sure that you're consistent with yourself when providing examples. But again, this is totally optional. We do see this as being a really effective step at improving task performance on a specified step. So highly encourage folks to play around with this, even though it is optional. And the big picture when you're thinking about workflows is really iteration is the secret to success. And there's a lot that you can do by testing and improving one step and one prompt at a time. And so, we've already shared this as a bit of a pro tip. After a workflow is generated, you should review each step. Look for things like clarity, the overall fidelity to your original instructions. On the right, I've outlined a few questions that you should be asking yourself. Of course, nothing is really going to be great without spending some time testing. So, test each workflow, evaluate each output. Of course, if you have errors upstream or structure inconsistencies upstream, those will propagate to later steps. And so here are a few tips that you can use to improve the performance of those workflows. Things like, again, that you probably learned as a part of our prompt education, improving the specificity of the task, reinforcing instructions in the background. So if you say, write a 2-sentence summary, your objective could be to write a 2-sentence summary. Again, just pattern matching and repetition tends to work very effective. Sometimes you might find that you're just trying to do too much in a single step. So it might be better to create 2 different steps and chain them together, which will improve the performance on both of those tasks. And then, of course, experimenting with alternative strategies. Sometimes, you might just flip the problem on its head and think of 2 or 3 different ways to solve it if you're hitting a roadblock trying to solve it in the way that you originally came up with. With that, hopefully you have a better sense for how to use DT-Rows, our prompting framework, within the platform, and of course, how to iterate on the workflows that you've built out. In no time, you'll be able to utilize best practices that we had shared with you, combined with this overall structure, in order to be able to automate really any task that comes your way. Thank you.